Welcome back to By the Pages, everyone. We are so glad to have you all back with us again for another deep dive.
Yes, welcome back, everyone.
This time, we are going to be taking a look at the Book of Psalms.
It's going to be an interesting one.
It is, and we're going to start off this deep dive with this line from Psalms. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake."
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I think that's Psalm 23.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, when you hear those words, it's just like you can almost feel the stress kind of melting away. It paints such a vivid picture, being cared for and protected and guided. And these themes of provision and guidance and peace, they're not just in this one psalm, they're woven throughout the entire book.
Yeah, and it's striking how the Psalms don't hold back on, emotions.
Oh, yes.
You turn a page and you go from feeling that peace to encountering, raw anguish or anger. Like, for instance, there's Psalm 6.6 that says, "I am weary with my groaning. All night I make my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears."
That's heavy stuff.
It is heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And, what's fascinating is that these deeply personal cries to God,
Right.
these laments, they were actually included in the official collection of holy writings.
I know. Isn't that interesting?
It is very...
Tells us that even back then, faith wasn't about pretending everything was fine.
Right.
It was about bringing your whole self to God mess and all
Yeah, and it gets even more intense in Psalm 3.7.
that. Okay.
The psalmist is straight up asking God to, smash his enemies' faces in.
Oh, really?
It says, "Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God. For thou hast smitten all mine enemies upon the cheekbone. Thou hast broken the teeth of the ungodly."
Wow. Those
Yeah.
are the imprecatory songs, right?
Yes.
The ones that make some people squirm because they seem so violent.
Yeah.
But they force us to ask, how did ancient people understand God's justice?
Right.
How do we reconcile those verses with the idea of a loving God? There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, there is a lot.
Yeah.
It's almost like a roller coaster of emotions, reading through the Psalms.
It really is.
And then we get to Psalm 18, and boom, this incredible description of God appearing in a storm with smoke and fire.
Yeah, theophany.
Yes.
It's a reminder that the Psalms aren't just about human feelings,
right.
They're also about the awesome, sometimes terrifying power of the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And the way those contrasting emotions are placed side by side, that's what makes it so real,
Yes.
so human.
You brought up something interesting earlier.
Okay.
The idea of bringing your whole self to God.
Right.
There's a theme that tops up often in the songs. God's special relationship with his people, particularly with King David and his descendants.
Mm-hmm.
Psalm 89. 3-4 states, "I have made a covenant with my chosen. I have sworn unto David my servant. Thy seed will I establish forever and build up thy throne to all generations."
Yeah, the covenant is like a sacred promise, right?
Yes.
It's not just a personal agreement. It shaped how entire nations saw their history, their identity.
Right.
In the Psalms, the covenant with David becomes a source of both hope and anxiety. Will God keep his promises even when things look bleak? It's a question that still resonates today.
It does resonate today, and even when the songs are about a whole nation, they still feel intensely personal.
I do.
And speaking of personal, let's jump to Psalm 135-7.
Okay.
It beautifully expresses this trust in God, even when things are tough. "I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in his word I hope. My soul waits for the Lord more than watchmen wait for the morning. Let Israel hope in the Lord, for with the Lord is unfailing love, and with him is full redemption."
It's almost as if the psalmist is saying, even when life feels like a long, dark night, there's a promise of dawn coming. And that unwavering faith in God's mercy and redemption, that's a powerful message that speaks to us even now.
It does, and it reminds me of that quote we started with about God leading us beside quiet waters. Even when things are rough,
Yeah.
there's this sense that God is still there, providing, guiding, ultimately leading us towards peace.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how these ideas of provision, guidance, and peace, they speak to something universal, a human longing that goes beyond any one time or place.
Right.
People read the Psalms and they find their own experiences reflected there, whether they lived thousands of years ago or are struggling with the same anxieties today.
It's wild how relevant these ancient poems still are.
I know.
You read the Psalms and it's like a window into the human heart. its joys, its sorrows, its doubts, its longings. It reminds you that you're not alone in those experiences.
And that's the beauty of it. They offer this language for engaging with God, for bringing your whole self to him without pretense or reservation.
Right.
And it's in that space of vulnerability and honesty that people often discover some profound truths about themselves and their relationship with the divine. It's not just about, God being there in those, big dramatic moments.
Right.
The Psalms also speak to those everyday anxieties we all feel. That feeling of being overwhelmed, lost, needing a safe haven.
Yeah, you see that a lot in the Psalms.
You do?
This yearning for sanctuary,
Right.
like in Psalm 5.7. But as for me, I will come into your house in the multitude of your mercy, and in your fear will I worship toward your holy temple.
It makes you wonder, what was it like for them back then?
Right.
What did it mean to find refuge in the temple?
Yeah.
And how do we in our modern world find those spaces, those practices that give us that same sense of peace and security?
That's a good question. And it's interesting how the Psalms connect this idea of seeking refuge with waiting on the Lord.
Yeah.
Psalm 27.1 says, "Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord."
So much of our modern life is about instant gratification, right? About getting what we want right now. But the Psalms remind us that sometimes the most faithful thing to do is wait to trust in God's timing.
Right.
To believe that even when we don't see it, he's working behind the scenes.
That's surrender. Letting go of our need to control everything.
Right.
And trusting that God has a plan, even if it doesn't make sense to us in the moment.
And you see this throughout the Psalms, this
Yeah.
wrestling between human desire and divine will.
Mm-hmm.
The psalmist longs for justice, for vindication, for relief from suffering.
Right.
But ultimately, it's about aligning your will with God's will, even when it's hard.
Yeah, there's a real tension there, but it feels honest.
It does.
Like in Psalm 74.1, where the psalmist cries out, "Oh God, why have you cast us off forever? Why does your anger smoke against the sheep of your pasture?"
Imagine the courage it took to ask those questions,
I know.
to challenge God like that.
Right.
The Psalms don't sugarcoat things.
They don't.
They show us that faith isn't about blind obedience. It's about bringing your doubts, your anger, your pain to God, and trusting that even in those raw emotions, there's room for relationship.
And that brings us back to the idea of bringing your whole self to God.
Right.
We see that reflected in the Psalms' emphasis on honesty and authenticity.
The psalmists don't shy away from expressing the full spectrum of human emotion.
Right.
Joy, sorrow, anger, fear, gratitude, doubt. They give us permission to be real with God,
Yes.
to bring our messy, imperfect selves to him without pretense or reservation.
It's like they're saying it's okay to not have it all figured out.
Yeah.
It's okay to question, to doubt, to wrestle with difficult emotions.
Yeah.
God can handle it.
And not only can he handle it, he welcomes it.
Right.
He wants us to come to him just as we are with all our complexities and contradictions. He doesn't expect us to be perfect, to have all the answers, or to pretend that we're not struggling.
That's a really liberating message.
It is.
Especially in a world where we're often pressured to present a perfect image, to hide our vulnerabilities, and to pretend that we have it all together.
The Psalms remind us that authenticity is key to a genuine relationship with God. We don't have to pretend to be someone we're not.
Right.
We can come to him with our doubts, our fears, our anger, our brokenness.
Yes.
And he'll meet us there with grace and compassion.
And speaking of grace and compassion,
Okay.
one of the most beautiful themes woven throughout the Psalms is God's forgiveness.
It's beautiful.
It's a reminder that no matter how far we stray, no matter how many mistakes we make,
Yeah.
God's love is always available to us. We just have to turn back to him.
It's a powerful message of hope and redemption.
Yes.
You see it in Psalm 103.12, where it says,
Yes.
"As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us." Just let that image sink.
Wow.
God's forgiveness isn't conditional or limited. It's complete, total, and available to everyone who seeks it.
That's a message that I think a lot of people need to hear, especially in a world where we're often bombarded with messages of guilt, shame, and condemnation.
The Psalms offer a counter-narrative, a message of grace, mercy, and unconditional love.
Yes.
They remind us that no matter what we've done, no matter how far we've strayed, God is always waiting for us to come home. He's always ready to forgive, to restore, and to make us whole again.
And that idea of coming home, of returning to God,
Right.
is another prominent theme in the Psalms.
Yeah.
The psalmists express this deep yearning for God,
They do.
this desire to be close to him, to know him more deeply, and to experience his love and guidance in their lives.
It's not just about a one-time decision or a set of beliefs.
Right.
It's about a lifelong pursuit of intimacy with God, a continual turning back to Him, a seeking after His presence in every aspect of our lives. And it's a pursuit that's fueled by a deep spiritual thirst, a longing for something more than what the world can offer.
You see that so vividly in Psalm 63.1,
Yeah.
where the psalmist says, "O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My body longs for you in a dry and weary land where there is no water."
Mm.
You can almost feel the desperation, the ache for God's presence.
It's a reminder that we were created for relationship with God,
Yes.
that our souls long for Him just as our bodies long for water. And it's in His presence that we find true satisfaction, true fulfillment, true life.
And it's not just about our individual relationship with God.
Right.
The Psalms also connect this yearning for God with a longing for His kingdom to come, for His will to be done on earth as it is in heaven.
It's about seeing our lives as part of a larger story, a story of God's redemptive work in the world. It's about partnering with Him to bring about justice, healing, and restoration to broken people and broken systems.
It's a call to action, right?
It is.
To take our faith beyond the walls of the church and into the streets, to be the hands and feet of Jesus, to work for a world that reflects God's heart for justice and righteousness.
Absolutely. The Psalms remind us that our faith isn't just about personal piety or escaping from the problems of the world.
Right.
It's about actively engaging in the fight for justice, standing up for those who are oppressed, and working to create a more just and equitable society.
And they also remind us that we're not alone in that mission.
Right?
We have each other.
We do.
And we have the shared language of faith to help us encourage, support, and challenge one another along the way.
Exactly. The Psalms emphasize the communal nature of faith, reminding us that we're called to live in right relationship with one another, to care for the vulnerable, and to work collectively towards the common good. That sense of shared purpose, of belonging to something bigger than ourselves, that's where we find strength and resilience, especially when the journey gets tough.
You see that beautiful sense of community expressed in Psalm 133.1, which says, "Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity." It's not just about tolerating each other or getting along.
Right.
It's about this deep sense of connection, of shared purpose of belonging.
And that unity, that sense of shared identity, it's not about erasing our differences or pretending that we all agree on everything. It's
Right.
about recognizing our shared humanity, our common need for grace, and our dependence on God.
Yes.
It's about coming together even in our differences to work towards a common goal, a world where God's love and justice prevail.
And it's interesting how the Psalms use music to express all of this.
Oh.
They're not just poems to be read silently. They're meant to be sung, chanted, shouted, whispered. They're a symphony of human emotion set to music.
Think about it, for centuries, people have been singing these words,
Right.
pouring their hearts out to God in song, finding solace and strength in the shared rhythms and melodies. Music has this incredible power to connect us, to move us, to express what words alone cannot.
And the Psalms don't shy away from using music to express the full range of human experience. You have these joyous celebrations of God's goodness, like in Psalm 98.4, where it says, "Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Break forth into joyous song and sing praises."
It's an invitation to let loose, to express our gratitude and joy in a way that's unrestrained, uninhibited, full of life. And there's something incredibly freeing about that, about letting go of our inhibitions and allowing ourselves to be swept up in the music, in the moment, in the presence of God.
But then you turn a page and you find these raw, gut-wrenching laments, like Psalm 13.1, where the psalmist cries out, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?"
And it's not just personal pain that's expressed through music.
Right.
The Psalms also lament the brokenness of the world, the injustice, the suffering, the violence. They give voice to the cries of those who are marginalized, oppressed, and forgotten.
Like in Psalm 74.1, where the psalmist cries out, "Oh God, why have you cast us off forever? Why does your anger smoke against the sheep of your pasture?" There's a rawness and honesty, a refusal to sugarcoat the pain of the world.
And it's in those raw, honest expressions of lament that we often find solidarity and comfort.
Yes.
We realize that we're not alone in our pain, that others have walked this path before us, and that God is big enough to handle our anger, our grief, our despair.
It's like the Psalms give us permission to grieve, to lament, to express the full range of human emotion, even the messy and uncomfortable ones. They remind us that faith isn't about pretending that everything is okay. It's about acknowledging the brokenness of the world and trusting that even in the midst of darkness,
Mm.
God is still present, still working, still loving.
And that's a message that's so relevant for us today, you know?
It is.
We're bombarded with images of suffering, injustice, and violence.
Mhm.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed, to despair, to wonder if God even cares.
Yeah, and the Psalms remind us that it's okay to ask those hard questions.
Right.
It's okay to wrestle with doubt, to express our anger and frustration.
Hmm.
Faith isn't about pretending that everything is fine.
Right.
It's about being honest with God about the pain we see in the world.
Yeah.
And trusting that he's big enough to handle our questions, our doubts, and our anger.
And the Psalms don't leave us stuck in that place of despair, you know? They
Yeah.
always point us back to hope, to the belief that God is ultimately in control and that his love and justice will prevail.
It's like that line from Psalm 30.5. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Even when things feel dark and hopeless, the Psalms remind us that dawn is coming.
And that hope isn't just wishful thinking.
Right.
It's grounded in the character of God and his faithfulness, in his promises. The Psalms recount the stories of God's mighty acts, the ways he's delivered his people in the past. And they invite us to draw strength and hope from those stories.
It's like they're saying, remember what God has done, remember his faithfulness,
Right.
and hold on to that hope even when things feel impossible.
And notice how the Psalms connect this hope with a call to action. It's not just about waiting passively for God to fix everything.
Right.
It's about partnering with him, about being his hands and feet in the world, about working for justice, healing, and restoration.
We see this so clearly in Psalm 82,
Yes.
where it says, defend the weak and the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed, rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked.
It's a powerful reminder that our faith has social and ethical implications. We're not called to simply retreat from the world and focus on our own personal salvation.
Right.
We're called to engage with the world, to fight for justice, to care for the vulnerable, and to work towards a world that reflects God's heart for righteousness and compassion.
And it's in that active engagement with the world and that wrestling with the difficult questions of faith and justice
Right.
that we often discover deepest truths about ourselves and our relationship with God.
The Psalms aren't just a collection of ancient poems.
Right.
They're a living, breathing conversation with God, an invitation to explore the depths of human emotion, to grapple with the complexities of faith, and to discover the hope, healing, and strength that can only be found in the presence of the divine.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the book of Psalms, I want to encourage you to keep exploring these powerful texts.
Yes.
Make them a regular part of your spiritual practice. Read them slowly. Meditate on their words.
Yeah.
And allow them to speak to your heart.
Don't be afraid to personalize the Psalms. Put yourself in the shoes of the psalmists. Imagine yourself crying out to God, expressing your gratitude, or wrestling with those difficult questions. The Psalms are a conversation with God, and you're invited to join in.
And remember that the Psalms aren't just ancient poetry.
Right.
They're living, breathing words that speak to the deepest longings of the human heart. They offer solace, challenge, and guidance for our journeys of faith and life.
So allow them to shape you, to mold you, and to draw you closer to the heart of God. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive into the Psalms, we encourage you to like, share, and subscribe to By the Pages. Thanks for listening.